You've been brainwashed. This is going to be a video about how we've literally been brainwashed by society and stuff. This is going to be very interesting, right? Because when you're born, immediately you undergo a tremendous amount of brainwashing, right? When you're born as a baby and then you get taken home by your parents, right? You get immediately you're put under their influence, literally up until the point where you're able to just be by yourself. When you're a little bit older, right? When you're born as a baby, you're quickly put under a tremendous amount of brainwashing. Tremendous amount of brainwashing, and yet until you're a little bit older enough to kind of handle yourself, I guess, right? Think about that. When you're born as a baby, you're immediately being brainwashed, I guess, which by your parents, which seems kind of insane, right? But they do. Your parents do they do condition you, they do mold you in their own way, right? That is brainwashing. Even though a lot of people would argue, right, that that's not really that bad. There's nothing wrong with your parents molding you in their own specific way. There's nothing wrong with your parents shaping you in their own specific way. But that is a form of brainwashing, right? They do put their their own ways of doing things into your head, right? And then that just becomes normal, and then you just kind of adopt their specific ways of doing things, right? This is of course, this a lot of people would argue, well, there's nothing wrong with your parents raising you, so to speak, right? Which I'm calling it brainwashing, but but it's people would argue that, well, you need to be raised by someone. You need to be raised in some way, right? But you're gonna have to admit that it is sort of a type of brainwashing, right? When you were born as a baby, get taken back home by your parents, right? They literally just mold you in their own way, right? There's no resistance. You can't counter anything they're doing to you, right? Which is kind of funny. It's kind of funny. Just as a baby, you're really helpless against brainwashing and stuff like this. You cannot help but get brainwashed. You can't help but be brainwashed by your parents and other people around you at that period of your life, right? When you're very young and little, right? Of course, and then what happens? As you start to mature, you get sent to school, right? Which is kind of that's kind of. I mean, a lot of people would argue, well, school's not really that bad, of course, but you do get indoctrinated in some ways, right? You do get taught very specific interpretations of reality and stuff like this, of history and etc. I can go on and on. It's a type of brainwashing. Of course, in school you learn to obey the teacher, right? You of course, which is not really. I mean, a lot of people would argue, what's wrong with that? I mean, you don't want to cause problems in school. You don't want to just if you could do anything and say anything to the teacher, that would cause chaos, right? Of course, I agree. But this type of mentality that gets drilled into you in school is kind of a little bit dangerous, right? The mentality is you just have to accept what the teacher tells you, otherwise you'll get bad marks on your papers or bad grades or something similar. You won't get accepted. You can't question the sort of the more intellectual, I guess not really intellectual, but the more, I guess, academic dogmas, whatever. You can't question it. If you do question it, you get you don't pass any of the tests that they give you and whatever, right? Which is kind of course, people would argue, well, well, what's the issue? I could just, well, I mean, of course, the school, what we get taught in school is somewhat factual. What's the issue then? Of course, I'm not arguing that isn't factual. In school, you do get this mentality drilled into you that you just need to kind of accept a lot of the more. You just need to just kind of accept what gets taught to you in school. You cannot kind of cause frustration and argue against anything that's being said in school. And of course, some people would say that, well, school, I mean, it does allow for some individual thinking. It's not just completely it doesn't just completely brainwash you and whatever and stuff. The teachers do let you ask questions or whatever, and I would agree to that and stuff, right? But there's some, you are taught to obey dogma in some way, right? There is like there is, like, and you do get taught to obey dogma and stuff. That's kind of true. I mean, of course, people would say, well, what is dogma? Dogma, anything. That's like, there's only one interpretation of the specific thing, right? When you were in school, right, when they were teaching specifically history, did anyone bother trying to create like an alternative timeline of those historical events, any historical event that you were getting educated about? Of course not. That's kind of funny. Like when you're in school, you only usually get taught one interpretation of something, especially in regards to history, but of course many subjects as well. So that's how you're dealing with dogma. You're not dealing with like some sort of kind of open-minded approach. You're getting taught dogma. You're getting brainwashed in some way. It just that's kind of something you need to think about, I guess. School, of course. Then I'm not just talking about school, because you do get, there's other, like in other areas of society as well, you do get kind of conditioned, right? You do get brainwashed a little bit, right, man? But it's not as pronounced as it is in school, right? Of course, then when you mature from school, you get sent to, I guess, secondary or high school, which is just school, just with a few extra things now, and then you get sent to college, university, and stuff, and then you get a job, and that's about it. And that's what most people do with their lives. And of course, I'm talking about like brainwashing. It's not just in the education centers and whatever, and there's other places where you go. There's also brainwashing and brainwashing and indoctrination through media, movies, cartoons. Yeah, right. Movies and cartoons used to be the ultimate tool for brainwashing. Right? They used to be movies and cartoons used to just be propaganda. Usually, they used to be filled with propaganda. Right? You can go back to like the World War II or World War I decade, right? Whatever time period in World War I and II and whatever. And if you kind of analyze a lot of the movies and cartoons that used to like get produced in this specific time period, right, you would realize there was a lot of propaganda, and it's really funny. There's a lot of stereotypical propaganda against different ethnic groups, right? A lot of derogatory cartoons against different ethnic groups, right? Using stereotypes, right? I don't want to because it is kind of very provocative, you know what I mean? It's too offensive. So, but, if you go to the time period of World War I and World War II, and obviously a lot of the cartoons and movies, they were using propaganda to spread a specific agenda and message, right? And that's how you can see like how movies and cartoons, they are tools that can be used to brainwash you, right? They give you a specific interpretation, again, of whatever, of any specific I guess thing, I don't know, morality, etc. They taint your way of seeing the world, right? Movies and cartoons, and of course other things we use to like entertain ourselves with, right? Even video games and stuff like this. There's some elements of brainwashing in them and stuff, right? But I'm kind of, when people talk about this, it sounds like it's just schizophrenia, mental illness. It just sounds like it's just a bunch of mental illness. I'm just being too, I guess I'm thinking too deeply about things that aren't important, right? But, when you're young, again, as I mentioned, like when you're a baby, right, you get taken home by your parents, they immediately indoctrinate and brainwash you. And of course, some people would argue, well, how are you going to get raised and stuff? Yeah, but the way you get raised, it alters you. It does taint your way of seeing the world, right? Your parents, they bring you up with a specific religion and whatever, and they pass their beliefs on to you and stuff. And this is kind of, this is obvious brainwashing. And then, I already mentioned school, right? And then when you get taught, when you're in school, you get kind of this, you get given dogma, basically, right? You only get given one interpretation of anything, right? When you're learning about history, you only get taught these specific historical events. You don't get taught any other kind of alternative timeline of history, right? But a lot of people would argue, well, yeah, there's only one valid historical timeline. And of course, I'm not going to argue against that and stuff. I'm just trying to make you think a little bit more, because usually you only get given dogma, and that's kind of in school, in my opinion, right? You don't really get allowed to provide any alternative explanation. It's just dogma usually. And that's kind of, a lot of people would argue, well, what's wrong with that? We need some sort of consensus, right, on history, and on a bunch of different things. So yeah, one historical timeline, that's all right. Okay, and if there's too many different explanations, that kind of becomes absurd. All right. There was, like, usually in school you do get given dogma, like only one interpretation that's valid, right, in regards to anything, right, especially history, but of course other subjects as well, even science and stuff. And of course, a lot of people would argue, well, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. And of course, I'm not going to argue that there's anything wrong here. That's not kind of my job. I'm just trying to help you kind of understand that your mentality has been shaped by so many different external influences, right? School, your parents, the media that you've been consuming since you were like a young little child. All of these different things, they've been tainting your way of seeing the world and stuff. And you have to understand that, right? Cartoons, movies, again, I mentioned, like, the time period in World War I and World War II. In that time period, right, there was like a lot of cartoons, movies were filled with like propaganda against specific ethnic groups, right, and Japanese people, and I don't want to mention any other types of groups, but if you look at the kind of the cartoons that were produced in the time period of World War I and World War II, you should find a lot of toxic things against Japanese people, against their the way they are and the way their culture is. There's a lot of stereotypical propaganda produced against them and stuff, right, to dehumanize them, and it was used, precisely for this reason, to dehumanize them. And it was, it's obvious propaganda, and it was used in World War I and World War II and stuff. Of course, even today, it's not really as much pronounced today, because it's kind of, I guess there's some protection against this sort of thing now, I guess. I don't know, but you can see what I'm talking about. Movies, cartoons, yeah, they do have elements of brainwashing in them. They do have the potential to brainwash you, right, to kind of taint your thinking on a variety of different subjects. Brainwashing, there's so many external factors, right, that influence your mind, that influence your development as a person, right? Again, when you're a baby, you're born, right? Your parents bring you back and they raise you with their belief system and whatever, and their ideas. And then you get sent to school, and then you get fed dogma, right? Dogma, which is, because you only get given one interpretation of what you're being taught. You don't get taught any other alternative explanations or ideas or whatever. That's kind of funny, in my opinion. Dogma. And then, of course, past school, you get, secondary, high school, then college, university, and then you get a job. And then, does the brainwashing stop? Of course not, because you're still getting molded by the society around you, right? Different people force their expectations on you, right? That's why, when you go outside, you can't just go naked. Of course, and I'm not saying you should do that. So this shows how you are being you're getting kind of manipulated, puppeteered by society, right? You do have to fit into specific expectations that society has. Otherwise, you get kind of ostracized, of course. And then a lot of people would say that, well, there is some amount of freedom. I'm not. And of course, when I was in the town, in the city center area, whatever, I saw like a guy wearing a dress. So maybe you might be able to get away with walking around naked now. I don't know. But, usually that would get you ostracized, right? So, there was some puppeteering by society in that regard. But it's kind of, you gotta carefully think about this, right? You gotta carefully think about this, right? Are you being puppeteered, right? Someone pulling your strings, so to speak. You being puppeteered. Is someone pulling your strings? Is someone pulling your strings? Think about it. People would say that, well, no one's pulling my strings. I'm not being puppeteered by anyone. I have my own ideas, my own independent way of seeing the world, have my own sort of independent way of thinking and whatever. But really think about it. Are you being puppeteered? Brainwashing. So, you have been brainwashed. You have to think about it. You have to kind of accept that, right? You've been taught so many different things when you were just a baby, right? Things that you couldn't even kind of argue or argue against or kind of critically analyze yourself. You were taught other people's ideas that you couldn't break down yourself. Right? It's kind of a little bit scary that people don't kind of realize this, right? That they've been brainwashed, not just by our society, but by so many different external factors that are beyond your control. You've been kind of molded and shaped by so many different external factors. It's kind of unbelievable, right? It's kind of a little bit scary, right? Like what ideas are your own ideas, right? Think about that really carefully, right? Like most of your ideas have just been passed on by other people and other external influences, right? Like there aren't, like think about it, your beliefs and stuff about the world. How much of it has been through your own intellectual inquiry? How much of it has been through your own thought processes? Not just something you've been taught by someone else. It's kind of funny a little bit, right? Nobody realizes that they've been brainwashed. It's just how it is, and stuff. I guess most people are kind of not really too critical about anything. They're kind of ignorant and stuff, and which is kind of whatever. And of course, there's always kind of, I mean, humans have always been getting brainwashed through different means and stuff. We've always been kind of indoctrinated, right? All the different cultures around the world, they've always had their own way of kind of seeing the world, and then I used to just get passed down through the generations and stuff. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit scary, I guess. The brainwashing stuff. The brainwashing. Maybe it's just natural. It's just how it is. Now we're just meant to get brainwashed. I don't know. But a lot of people aren't really critical about anything. They're kind of ignorant and stuff. It's kind of, being critical is so important. Being a critical thinker. What does that mean? That means you check everything. You check your own belief systems and stuff. You check things constantly. You don't just accept things, right? You get it. You constantly kind of go over your information. You know what I mean? You be critical. You know what that means? You look at the details carefully, right? Most people don't do that. It's kind of funny. They just turn a blind eye. They stay ignorant and stuff, which is kind of funny and sad as well, right? They don't really carefully analyze anything, and you have to analyze things carefully and stuff. You cannot just be ignorant. You've been brainwashed. What does that mean? It means that your ideas and stuff, your belief system's been, it was put in your head by other people. It wasn't something that you came up with on your own. That's kind of funny. You think about morality, right? I mentioned the time period of World War I and World War II, right? The Nazis, right? They had this type of morality that it's okay, right, to kill off a lot of different people and ethnic groups, especially the Jews, obviously, right? That was their morality. That's what they were brought up with and stuff, and they just saw it as being correct. What are the odds that that's like you're undergoing something like you experienced some sort of brainwashing similar to what happened to the Germans during the time period of World War I and World War II? Like, how do you know that your way of seeing the world is true? And right, the Nazis saw that. The Nazis, the way they saw the world was that the different ethnic groups have to be exterminated, right? Especially the Jews and stuff, and they saw that as being the only correct way. What are the odds that this isn't gonna apply? That this isn't gonna apply to you've been taught as well, right? A specific morality, specific interpretation of the world. Right? How do you know that you're not suffering from what the Nazis were suffering from, right? That you weren't just brainwashed by different, I guess, by the politics of, maybe not the politics, kind of stupid, but by society, etc. Not for the benefit of yourself, but just because the society wants you to act in this specific way. Think about that really deeply, man. You can look at the time period of World War I and World War II. That's so important for, if you want to have any clue about indoctrination and brainwashing, if you want to understand sort of a lot more of the details on this, you gotta look at the time period of World War I and World War II. Cause that was like kind of infamous. It was a time period where so many different people in so many different nations were getting just brainwashed and stuff, right? The time period of World War I and World War II. If you want to understand any form of indoctrination and brainwashing, if you want to understand any form of anything related to indoctrination and brainwashing, you gotta go to World War One and World War Two, World War One and World War Two. You gotta kind of analyze what happened to the people, and especially not in Germany, Nazi Germany and stuff like this. Especially Nazi Germany, right? You gotta see what happened to them if you want to know the effects of brainwashing and indoctrination, right? Because isn't it possible that we're not so different? Like the way society isn't really that different from I guess not Nazi Germany. I guess it is kind of a little bit, right? Because I mean, I guess different ethnic groups are being exterminated, so there is some progress, right? But think about it. Compare Nazi Germany, right, to the society you're living in, which is kind of seems insane, but it's the perfect way to understand what I'm saying and getting at, right? Because during I guess the time period in World War One and World War Two, indoctrination and brainwashing it had to be it had to just kind of allowed for and stuff. It had to be made to happen, right? Because there was war and the politics and stuff like this kind of forced this type of indoctrination and brainwashing to happen. It had to happen. So yeah, it's kind of funny. Had to happen. It's kind of funny. It was made to happen. It was made to happen. It's just a quick checking if someone's gonna come out. It's kind of scary. Look at World War One and World War Two specifically. If you want to have any clue about what the processes of brainwashing and indoctrination, look at what the Nazis, the Soviets, what were they doing? They were using propaganda to manipulate the masses, right? Through cartoons, through movies, etc., and through different things like this. They're using propaganda to manipulate the masses. That's still being used today, right? And of course people would say, where is it then? Where's the propaganda? It's usually it's always in front of your face. The movies that you watch, the cartoons, the other forms of media that you consume, right? There usually is propaganda tied into it. Typically it's not very extreme, right? That's why you can't notice it, but it's still there and stuff is in the background. It's in the background usually though. You just can't notice it because it's so mild now, right? It's not, when it was World War One and Two, the propaganda was so obvious, it was right in front of your face. But now it's just became more mild. It's not really as pronounced now, of course, because that's just how it is now. It's not really that extreme because we're not at war anymore, so there's no really strong need to bring out propaganda. But you can still mildly feel some of it, right? Some propaganda and brainwashing and influences in our media, movies, cartoons, because it's so mild now. You can't really notice it as much as we used to in the time period of World War One and World War Two. So yeah, brainwashing. You've been brainwashed. That is true, and people would argue, no, not me, right? But, when you were born as a baby, right, you were like taken back home by your parents, whatever. They just brought you up in their own specific way and stuff, and they passed their ideas and belief system onto you and stuff. That's kind of funny. And then you went to school, and then other forms of education. You went to secondary or high school, and then college, university, and your mind was just getting molded by this sort of influence. You were brainwashed for such a long period of your life, and now you might be a little bit older. And you might be able to think for yourself finally now, right? Which is kind of, and then the first thing, once you become mature enough, you have to realize that you've been brainwashed. Like the ideas and the beliefs you have in your head, they weren't made by yourself. They were made by external influences and factors. You have to know about this. You have to kind of understand this, right? The beliefs that you have, most of your beliefs and ideas were put into your head by other people. You didn't think of your own. A lot of your beliefs and ideas aren't from your own head, they're from other people's heads, right? Other people have put their own ideas and beliefs into you, and that's funny. It's really funny. You gotta realize and recognize that, though. You gotta ask yourself, like, I mean, it's just so hard, though, right? It's tricky as well. You've been brainwashed, and it's like kind of hard to I guess accept it. It's very difficult to accept this. that you've been brainwashed and molded by so many different external influences and factors. And it's kind of like, what are you gonna do? I guess not a lot you can do and stuff, right? It is scary that you've been brainwashed and molded by so many different influences. You've been brainwashed, right? But alright, so what are you gonna do about this? Really, I don't know. You gotta. This is something you have to recognize. You have to recognize this, right? That you've been brainwashed and indoctrinated and molded by so many different influences and external factors. You have to understand this. It's so critical and important that you understand this, that you've been brainwashed and indoctrinated and molded and programmed in so many different ways. How many of your ideas and beliefs are your own, things that you thought of and thought through by yourself, not things that were passed on to you by other people? You gotta realize that there's only a small amount of things in your head that are yours, right? Things that were made by your own mind. A lot of your ideas and beliefs come from other people and stuff, and of course a lot of people would argue, well, yeah, obviously you can't think of everything yourself, and you know, I do agree to that. I'm not saying that you should just reject just because it comes from someone else. You should just reject it. I'm not saying that, right? But you gotta be critical. You gotta think that, like, you gotta think about, like, how many of your ideas are your own, right? You gotta think about whether or not you've been kind of indoctrinated and brainwashed, or in some regards, right? You know, of course. You know, this is kind of almost becomes absurd, right? You're not allowed to use anyone else's ideas. I mean, I'm not saying that, obviously, right? Because if you could, like, there's so many things that you can do on your own as a person, right? As an individual. Of course, I'm not saying you should just discount anything that comes from any other person or source, but you should be critical, right? That's all I'm saying, right? You should be critical because you have been brainwashed and indoctrinated. You have to kind of understand this and keep it in your head, right? That you've been kind of brought up with a very specific and limited interpretation on a variety of different things and topics and subjects, right? You've been indoctrinated. That's what you gotta kind of understand, right? You've been indoctrinated and stuff, and brainwashed and programmed, and you gotta, in some way, think about how you're gonna shake off this type of brainwashing and dogma. You gotta be more critical, man. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that just because it comes from some other person or someone, like, just because a specific idea comes from other people and some other source, that you should reject that. I'm not saying that, right? But you gotta be critical, man. You gotta develop some sort of critical thinking. You gotta make sure you're not just accepting other people's ideas as just because they say it's true for no real intelligible reason. You gotta kind of become a critical thinker and stuff. And of course, people would say, well, what do you mean? I mean, like, you know, your idea. Like, this is kind of very important, right? You know, like, how many of your ideas and beliefs, how many of them have you checked carefully, right? You know, which is kind of, not only have you checked, but how many of these ideas and beliefs have you proven on your own, right? Like, this is gonna sound very insane, right? You know, a lot of your ideas and beliefs, you just accept them because other people say they're true, and then you just accept them just because other people said they were true. You rely on some sort of public authority, and they claim it's true, and then so you accept it, right? How many of your ideas and beliefs have you checked and proven to be true on your own? This is so important. A lot of you probably haven't checked and proven any of your own beliefs, ideas, whatever. A lot of you haven't really checked or analyzed, dude. That's kind of. A lot of you probably are holding other people's ideas and beliefs in your head that you haven't even properly considered yourself. That's just so insane. I'm kind of mumbling with my words because kind of out here now, early in the morning out here. You know, anyway, trying to get this video done. You know, a lot of your ideas and beliefs. How many of you, like, did you check them, prove them yourself? Did you do any kind of intellectual inquiry and kind of analyze your own beliefs and see which ones are true? see and test and kind of check which ones are true and stuff. Have you did this? Are you just blindly, did you just blindly accept what other people taught you? And this is what I'm trying to get at, right? You have been brainwashed, you have been programmed, you have been molded by so many different external influences. It's kind of insane. the ideas, you have other people's ideas and beliefs in your head, and you haven't even properly checked and considered whether or not these ideas and beliefs are even factual, or if they're just propaganda or tools used to manipulate you. Think about it critically, man. You gotta think about this so critically. You gotta think about it critically, man. You gotta think about this so critically and stuff. You've been given other people's ideas and beliefs and stuff. You gotta think carefully about this. You've been given other people's ideas and beliefs, but how many of these ideas and beliefs have you checked for yourself? Did you critically analyze anything that's been given, anything that's been taught to you since you were young? Have you critically been looking back and kind of checking all of the information you were given ever since you were just a little baby? This is what you need to do, man, because you have been brainwashed, you have been programmed, and you have been kind of manipulated in so many different ways. It's just, I can't really even say too much on this, right? I mean, I guess I can't say too much. There's just not enough time to kind of cover all of everything that I want to say, right? You've been brainwashed, you've been manipulated since you were a little baby. So insane. This is what you have to kind of look back to the time when you were young. I guess you have to look back all the way to the time when you were just born as a baby, and think about it, like all the information you were given ever since you were just a little baby. How much have you gotta critically analyze it, check it. How much of it is it true? How much of anything that you know is true, right? This is what I'm trying to get at, right? It's kind of seems and sounds kind of insane, right? Think about all the ideas, all the information you were given ever since you were just a little baby. How much of it is true, factual? And of course, people would argue that, well, there is some consensus that is true, and there's some, alright, and there's some proof and whatever, and I can check, and I did check, and well, what about, okay, fine, but be critical a little bit more, right? Think about, ever since you were a little baby, right? How much of the information that you were given ever since you were a little baby was factual, was true? Think about it. Think about it, really. It's gonna be kind of shocking, because you'll realize, right, that a lot of the information you were given ever since you were a little baby was kind of just, a lot of it was just nonsense, and just something that was used to just kind of to keep you calm and quiet. Think about it, really. Be critical, develop that type of thing, that type of criticality. You were brainwashed and indoctrinated and manipulated ever since you were just a little baby. That's so insane. Ever since you were just a little baby. That's really insane. Isn't that insane? You were brainwashed and indoctrinated and manipulated ever since you were just a little baby, and which is funny, man. That's really funny, right? That you were kind of you were getting indoctrinated since you were just a little baby. That and now you're probably just some old. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're not that old now. Maybe you're just a young man now. I guess, I don't know. Maybe you're still brainwashed. I guess, I don't know. But when you were think about, you were getting brainwashed and indoctrinated and manipulated when you were just a little baby, man. That's so weird. Of course, you can't help but get brainwashed and manipulated. You can't just it's not in your control at that period of your life when you're just a baby, right, a young child. You really only develop some sort of independence when you're in your late teens and early 20s, I guess. I don't know. Think about it. You've been brainwashed and indoctrinated. You gotta think about that very carefully. You've been brainwashed, indoctrinated, molded, and manipulated by so many different external factors and influences ever since you were just a little baby. That's so insane. That is so insane. Ever since you were just a little baby, man. And now you're a lot older and stuff. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you're still, maybe a baby's watching this, I don't know. Well, whatever it might be, you've been brainwashed, you've been manipulated, you've been programmed ever since you were a little baby. You have to understand that and stuff. You have to, now what, okay, so now what should I do? Now you have to kind of and be more critical. Right now you have to kind of look back at all the information you were given ever since you were just a little baby, and just critically check it and analyze it and see if this really is true, or if it's just something that was used to keep me or you, I guess, quiet and calm and relaxed, so you don't question too many different things. Think about it, man. Ever since you were a little baby, you were getting indoctrinated and brainwashed. That's kind of funny. And now maybe you're like maybe you're a teenager, or maybe you're in your early 20s or whatever. Now you got to think about this, man. Look back to the period when you were just a little baby, right? All the way back to that beginning phase of your life, that beginning part of your life. Look at all the information you were given ever up until that point. Like, well, I'm kind of mumbling and my words are all over the place. Look back to, like, since you were like just a baby, right? And all the way through your whole development, right? Look at all the information you were given, right? Have you critically checked any of it? Have you analyzed? Have you properly considered it, right? Or have you just accepted it because it was just given to you at that point of your life, and it was just true just because it is, just because the teacher or someone said it was true and stuff? You gotta not just do that. You can't just accept things, you know what I mean? It's kind of, you know, there's so many different things I could say here, right? But you know, you gotta be a lot more critical, man. It's so crucial that you be a lot more critical about everything, especially the information you were given since you were just a baby, right? Up until now, you gotta check it, consider, just analyze it, because you have been brainwashed and programmed. This is just factually true. You have been brainwashed. You have been indoctrinated. This is true, right? You know, you have been brainwashed, right, by so many different external influences and factors. I just hope that you've at least developed some sort of, just like your own independent way of thinking, right? Your own independence, your own intellectual independence, right? You're able to connect your own dots. You don't need someone to do things for you intellectually, right? You know, you don't just outsource your thinking to other people. Hopefully, right? Hopefully, right? This video is gonna kind of help enlighten you a little bit, right? It's gonna make you think that, okay, are these ideas my own, or have they just been passed on to me and I just accept them just because that's just the way it is? Hopefully you'll be more, I guess, critical now, I guess. I don't know. Hopefully you'll be a lot more intellectually independent now. I don't know. Think about it. You've been brainwashed, programmed, manipulated ever since you were like a little baby. That's insane. It's really, really insane. Think about it. Think about that. Ever since you were just a little baby, you've been brainwashed and manipulated ever since you were just a little baby. Ever since you were just a little baby. That is so insane. And think about it. You gotta break through that. Break through that conditioning. Ever since you were a little baby. You gotta break through the indoctrination, brainwashing. Break through it. You gotta break through it.